CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we have Michele Mucia. She's the VP of Healthcare at Bureau Veritas North America, a 20-year veteran in the healthcare space. We recently got to talking about a presentation she did at the ASHI conference. We typically want to call that now Healthcare Facilities Innovation Conference. And by the way, happening next year in Ohio. You can find that stuff on LinkedIn and all over the place. She did this presentation, and we want to learn more about it for those that weren't there. And that's going to cover FCA, which is Facility Condition Assessment. And it's really around how to speak to the C-suite. So we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other stuff. Michele, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And, you're spot on. I think, I want to definitely give a shout out to ASHI. They've been an instrumental part of my career and shaping my career. And as I talked to some people over this week, it's important to be able to reach audience that weren't able to attend the conference and have the education that they need to help make their buildings healthier in a way that makes sense, right? So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And, you and I got into a lot of this stuff when we previously met, and we were just kind of talking about it and then getting this on schedule. So
right.
I'm going to just start off out of the gate for everyone's benefit. What is FCA, and why does it matter for making the case to leadership?
That's a good question. It's one that, we had heavy discussion on at the innovation conference this year. And for those of you that aren't aware of what a facility condition assessment is, it's a vital process that every building owner or facility manager should conduct regularly. And for hospitals specifically, we recommend for ASTM E2018-24 standards about every 5 to 10 years. And what it is it takes a higher level look at your building for all of your major, appliances and or pieces of equipment such as roof, facade, boiler, chiller, HVAC systems, make, model, serial number. Sometimes some companies will barcode, asset tag, inventory that into a CMMS platform with appropriate PM routines and standardizations across that, right? So you can maintain that equipment. But the purpose of a facility condition assessment is just that, to take a look at the condition of the equipment from the born date, the intended functionality of the piece of equipment. For those of you that suffered through COVID, we understand that those pieces of equipment suffered through demand flow issues, creating energy issues and consumption issues, and taking a look at all of the standards and compliance metrics associated with that, creating capital plan to set you up for a successful budgetary business case to your C-suite. That should be the end goal. In working with an engineering firm or project management company that will successfully show you how to roadmap that, right? Not just come in and assess and then give you a nice report to put on your desk, but really show you how to use that data in a meaningful way to start moving yourself away from that break-fix model and shifting from what the industry likes to see operations as a cost center, right, into a profit center. How can I use this information to shift or help my CFO and the C-suite and those that sit on strategic committees to allocate budgets for ways to produce soft savings or hard savings, cost avoidance towards the bottom line, right? How can I manage those programs more efficiently? So that's really the outcome and the homologous nature between how, if you are lucky enough to have a CMMS platform and have an FCA done, how they should work homologously together to give you those outcomes.
I'm glad that you said that, because oftentimes I'll prepare a few questions for an episode and then I'll start ignoring what I wrote down so I can focus on the conversation. I enjoy that. And I think a lot of people just want to see a real conversation. But that was one of my questions about how, when you do a facility condition assessment, how that converges with or interplays with, where the CMMS comes into play in that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And for not every hospital has funding for a CMMS platform, or from what I've seen, might be running multiple versions of platforms, for acquisition over the years. But they run homologously in the sense that your FCA will allow for priority scoring, right, for benchmarks against various different codes or compliance metrics. If hospitals are running Joint Commission or DMV, say whatever their choices are for regulatory compliance towards CMMS K-tag requirements. FCI health score for a building condition, as we talked about, the capital plan for immediate short and long-term replacement, maybe for master planning, space utilization, so on and so forth, and the replacement costs associated with upgrades for modernization, compliance metrics, right, documentation, showing those closed loop work order management processes for repairs and deficiency, prioritizations for ILSMs or interim life safety measures, of course, return on investment and deficiency tracking, right? Partnered with that CMMS platform. So if I'm a company that's going to come out and do an FCA, I'm looking for immediate findings that I can see that are a detriment to the health of your building, right? Maybe I'm inventorying everything because that's a requirement from a compliance perspective if you're an accredited organization and being surveyed. Maybe it's quarterly for construction processes, right? The point is that you need to have a continuum of care in the physical environment as well as potentially on the clinical side. So CMMS platforms can be utilized both on the clinical and physical environment to benchmark an entire facility. A facility condition assessment is going to focus more on the physical environment. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but ultimately it should evaluate the physical condition of the infrastructure and prioritize everything.
It does answer the question, and I think we would likely both agree that that's a question that continues to live. And these things that you're talking about when we strategize and we go from the building envelope, which might in fact include exterior elements,
Sure.
grounds, if you will, when we start to build that into a CMMS and then start focusing in more and more, this is an ongoing process, which is one of the things I've seen in the CMMS world where through not just with an FCA, but with the CMMS in particular, where they know they need it, they might not have it, they've got one that's not working, whatever the
Right.
case may be, they go out and they get something, and then they start rolling through this process of digitization, and then it starts to dissipate. It starts to lose steam because you've got turnover. Somebody who is a champion leaves, and a lot of people, even in CMMS space, that are on the front lines, customer facing, they really don't necessarily. I'm not calling them out. I'm just saying a lot of times they don't know what really goes into operating facilities like this and what's really entailed. So we're talking about how important an FCA is and how the CMMS plays a critical role in that so that you can document it, see it, and then create actionable items. All these things, that's a heavy workload. And if
Right.
it falls down and it doesn't continue as an ongoing thing, then it's all for naught. A lot of money wasted, a lot of time. Do you see that a lot as well, where people get stuck and yep, we're doing this, and then they never really did?
Yeah, I think, and although, where I am currently employed, my responsibility is to develop business for facility condition assessment. But what I always tell my customers is make sure that if you're going to buy it, that you're going to use it and use it in a way that's going to provide core, broad workspace strategies that are successful in maintaining efficient operations. I think, you have facilities every day, you'll have open PMs, for example. Maybe they're understaffed, right? And their job is to keep the building running on a day to day basis. And I think there is change going on in our healthcare facilities. We have generations that are retiring with Rolodex of information that they're leaving with. It wasn't necessarily streamlined or provided in a data migration or fancy work order management CMMS platform, right? for auditing records, benchmarking, all these critical things that we're looking at for sustainability, opportunities for spend reduction, these sorts of things. So I do see that. So I think that there's a key element to this. It's not just buying a CMMS platform from whatever provider you choose. It's not just buying an FCA from a provider that you choose. It's creating strategic partnerships with people that can help you tell a story to the C-suite, to have a continuum of care and process improvement, to allocate budgets properly, to be able to maintain a facility continuously and show evidence of compliance, all while doing that. And for each department, as stakeholders sitting at a table, if it's clinical, non-clinical, C-suite, facilities, either way you look at it, all have a stake and cost of ownership and accountability to that piece every day, all day, and coming back to the table to look, if you're fortunate enough to have a CMMS platform real time, and what isn't working, what is working. Let's go back to fifth grade, right?
Hmm.
For taking science class, for the key elements to problem solving. What's the problem? How do we solve it? What metrics do we put in place to make it work? What's the outcome? What's the KPI? And how do we measure that? And then keep that moving until you get a process that works for you. And that's what we want to coach when we're selling FCAs. That's what we want to coach when we're selling CMMS platforms collaboratively, and teaching younger generations that are coming into this business how to run these hospitals in an efficient manner.
Yeah, and I love the way you said that, and it's really packed, it's dense, but if folks slow down and kind of take that in,
Right.
the whole time you're describing it, I'm thinking about when someone's up and coming, maybe they're younger. Somebody comes into the industry, it's a new. The industry is a new to them. And if they're in the roles that can benefit from both the FCA and what it does within the CMMS, I always look at the CMMS as an opportunity for someone to, kind of like day one, what's going on in here? And they can go into the CMMS and they can look at this, and they might want to, kind of plug it into their brain now that if you're in the healthcare space and you're part of maintenance or you're part of operations and you're part of even that leadership group,
Right.
your computerized maintenance management software should have some various clues, and each of you are going to use it differently. Some are looking at when is the last time we did an FCA and who did it and what did we find? When is the next time we're going to do an FCA? Or somebody's looking at these KPIs versus those KPIs. You already mentioned CapEx and all these things. And too often we see these stories where they've done it right. They bring in a great organization like yours. They do an FCA, they update the CMMS, and then 2 years later, it's again starting to fall apart. That's why the story is never really going to change. But the reason we're talking about it is we know what a real impact that makes. So I wanted to ask you if you can tie this to there's a really big thing being talked about now, and it's been in the last couple of years for sure, about
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure and how whether if it's a new facility, you don't have these issues necessarily, but a lot of the facilities across North America are 40, 50, I've heard as old as near 100 years.
Correct.
How does an FCA help a healthcare organization mitigate the risks of infrastructure degradation?
So very good question, and a meaty question to say the least as well. I think that there's several different approaches. I think, since COVID or even before, even 10 years ago when Ashley was looking at a macro trend to our healthcare industry, even before that, when you saw, Catholic organizations or Methodist hospitals becoming part of large IDNs, as part of an acquisition. So it starts there. There's times when we are asked to perform facility condition assessments as part of an acquisition. Well, what am I buying? Am I buying a 100-year-old building? What am I getting myself into? How can that be used as a way to negotiate, right? As I'm acquiring this building, or maybe I don't want to. Maybe it's to my benefit to demo this building and start from scratch with new construction. And that's usually not the case. But the FCA needs to be looked at from a standpoint of an infrastructure standpoint. If I'm a VP of facilities, for example, or I'm a VP of real estate for a large health system, I need to understand, am I going to demo this building? Am I going to build new? Or how am I going to modernize this space in a way that is going to give me the most ROI for my dollar for space utilization, right? How am I going to redesign this space to be able to make this efficient and give me top dollar and make this attractive to my community to gain customers at the end of the day or retain patients, right? So we're seeing a lot of that. So sometimes we're asked to work as a partner with an architect to do the MEP strategy for what hospitals might be looking to do to permit for infrastructure planning. Um, what does my mechanical system look like for the design that I'm anticipating that I would prefer this hospital to be? Can it accommodate it? If it can't, what do I need to do to upgrade this? How much is it going to cost me? What is the risk? Am I going to have patients in the building when I'm doing this? What metrics do I need to put in place? So all of those things are put into play, right? If it's new building, you touched on something key there. I think it's said that when you build a new hospital, it should be built in a way that it's going to run for years. Maybe it hasn't been. Maybe you're in a climate where things are depreciating much faster than you'd prefer. Those things also need to be taken into consideration. I've seen new construction with intended outputs for equipment or structure that is crumbling within 2 to 3 years where there's issues. And I've seen hospitals that are 100-year-old buildings that are still running efficiently that need minor upgrades. So it's really indicative of that property, and there's really no one way to go about looking at it. And that is the importance of the FCA and why it's so important to be able to do these things every 5 to 10 years as a recommendation under ASTM. There's a lot of platforms out there that are saying, okay, we'll monitor all of your equipment. We'll give you a general output of the condition of that equipment. And I would caution people on that and end users. I think that's good, month over month or year over the year. But at the end of the day, you really need, if you don't have internal engineers in house, you really need to be doing that facility condition assessment to maintain your asset quality, your building, your infrastructure planning for construction, build outs, bump outs, modernization, asset preservation, more importantly, patient care and energy reduction, right? Ultimately, it's revenue versus risk. And that's really what your C-suite is going to be looking at when you're looking to modernize, demo, and or sell or acquire.
Yeah, this again, a lot of information there, and as I listen to you and I think about the different times over the years when I might have had the honor, the privilege to work with some kind of a healthcare client, right? Maybe it's skilled nursing, maybe it is a hospital system, anything like that. The more you do that, you start to really see it. For them, I imagine that they lose a lot of visibility because they're so busy with what they're already doing. And some people might ask, well, why would I bring a company in to do the FCA when it's me, it's us, we should know everything about our facility? And I would say, well, that's true, but how are you going to mitigate the disruption of performing an FCA? And if you're with the right kind of company that understands you and what you're looking for, and they also know how to say, hey, we found this, and this, you should be looking at that, and they're not trying to sell you something. The reason you would look to an outside company to perform this is that is all they do. They know what they're doing. Now, I'm sure there's pretenders out there, but that's, kind of where the rubber meets the road. You've got all this experience. I wanted to ask kind of a random question. Could you estimate in any way the number of facilities that you've walked in your career?
Well, it hasn't been in heels, I can tell you that. But oh gosh, I can't even think of measuring that. I mean, this year alone, or in the past 3 years alone, it's probably been over 300 million square feet, if not more. There's some
Wow.
hospitals I know more than others. Where having worked on the equipment side of the business for a couple of large companies over the years, and having that be required, and the need is different, right? Every hospital's footprint is very different. It's been added onto over the years. Different construction processes. It hasn't been until recently where we've taken a look at approaches such as centralization of procurement, and driving down those costs, sustainability metrics, benchmarking, all of those key buzzwords that are leading us sustainability. It used to be we're going to bid this out. Maybe it's low bid, and an air handler is an air handler, a chiller is a chiller. And so you're starting to see that trend, and I'm being facetious, right? But you're starting to see that trend change. And the reason for that is energy costs, sustainability, road mapping, net zero neutrality, all of the things that we're doing. But, you know, outside of that, and having to tell you exactly how many square feet of hospitals I've walked over the years, it's several million square feet, and it's all different. And nothing is the same, and nor should it be, because it's going to be indicative of that particular demographic and what's needed, right? From a safety
Yeah.
standpoint as well.
Yeah. And that, I think the reason I asked the question really was around that, where it really conveys at least a sense of the magnitude of exposure you've had to these environments. And you said something really important in that none of them are the same. It's
Mhm.
just not a cookie cutter situation. A university hospital system or a facility that is of a certain type or maybe even ilk or whatever you want to call it is very different than one that's for profit versus another one that's nonprofit, and it's all over the board. And then you've got different styles of facilities. When did they grow? When did they add something on? When did they tear part of it down and rebuild it? When did they shut down an entire section, and now you've got 4 or 5 different pods out on the property, and it's just constantly, which is exciting and cool, but it's also, you got to have people that know what they're doing. I want to ask a question about the FCA itself. So if you're performing an FCA, and there's a big advantage and benefit to being able to make a case to leadership for whatever it might be, right, relative to the facility, the envelope, the equipment, etc.,
Mhm.
is there also oftentimes a barrier or resistance for leadership to allow the FCA to happen in the first place?
Oh, good question. I have health systems. I mean, in my current sales role, that's the big ask, right? I mean, we have hospitals taking budgetary proposals all day long, right? They know they need it. They know they want the FCA, but how do I get that approved? And that's really where the business case needs to come into play, right? So the short answer is yes. If you want a long answer, you need to establish a proper business case to be able to get that approved. If you don't have a format for that to be able to establish a business case, the ask for those things and that capital budget or that operating budget, I recommend using CMMS Schedule A, which you can download off their website. And it'll help you put a structure behind what you're asking for and ask appropriate questions that the C suite might be asking to be able to do that. So, I think that's really the answer. It's up to you. I mean, if you're asking, it's revenue versus risk, right? If you're going to ask a CFO for $80 million of capital planning dollars to replace all of your equipment in your building, if it's boilers, chillers, if you're responsible for, let's say, 20 million square feet across 12 states, you better have a business plan mapped out for that. Why do you need that money? Who needs it first? What's the prioritization? What's the turnaround time? What's my ROI? And what's my risk of action versus inaction? Can you make that boiler last one more year for me, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so that's what I'm seeing in the industry. And that's what I meant in the beginning of this conversation about not just buying an FCA from a company, not just buying a CMMS platform or a work order management tool, but working with strategic business partners that can help you lay out that business plan in a way that's going to help you get approved for the first step. And I really think that the facility condition assessment is the first step by way of utilizing that work order management data to help you move away from that break fix model. If it's for life cycle operating cost, to replace those pieces of equipment and or for capital planning purposes and modernization.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all good stuff because For me, I know I'm learning stuff right now, which suggests to me that anyone else that gets to consume this will learn something or maybe even reaffirm something. And you've given a resource for somebody to kind of where to start and kind of build that case to build the case, so to
Yeah,
speak.
for
So
sure.
um, I want to ask one more question around all this, and then we're going to switch to the fun question segment. So before that, though, I wanted to ask you, how does purpose play a critical role in this process?
Purpose as it relates to infrastructure, replacement costs, or process improvement, or all of it?
I would say all of it. And this is because I was reviewing some of the materials from the presentation and I saw a section of it and I looked at it and I'm like, ooh, I like that. I want to ask her about that on the podcast.
I think if you're alluding to remembering your purpose each day, why are you there? Why do you go to work every day? I think each hospital system has a purpose. We have a responsibility to keep our patients safe and the ability or inability to defend in place. That is code compliance. It's what your responsibility is when your loved one walks through that door. You want to know that you're choosing a facility that's going to keep your loved ones safe. You're going to be able to facilitate a medical procedure and be able to have that person go home in less than 2 days, saving the hospital money, reducing cost, right? So that really is the purpose of any healthcare organization. And I think day to day, from a facility standpoint, that translate across the board as every stakeholder's goal. Now, the meaning and purpose behind each person's job as it relates to that main purpose is different, right? So, your purpose as a facilities person is to maintain the physical environment, whereas a CFO or a COO have different purposes within the organization. But your goal and purpose should be synonymous across the board, and then spreading out responsibilities amongst that purpose in order to gain an achievable outcome that everybody is looking for, which is profitability, sustainability, and healing for the patient and your most important patient, which is the building, right? We need to focus on that building health.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So, time for the fun question segment. And they're kind of like softballs. This isn't like a gotcha moment. This is so people can get a little bit of flavor behind you and some of the stuff you like. So, number 1, what is your favorite music?
Oh boy, that's tough. I mean, I definitely like your Metallica t-shirt in the back, but I would say it depends on the mood. I am a lover of R&B, jazz, blues, something with a little bit of soul, some flavor to it. So I think that would be my first choice.
All right. I like it. I like it. There's no wrong answers here. This is the best part of the podcast for some people. I just got somebody who wrote me about it this week and I'm like, "You think we should keep that?" And he's like, "Hell yeah." I'm like, "All right, we're doing it." So, fun question number 2, what is your favorite sport or hobby? And if it's a sport, it does not necessarily have to be one that you play. It could be one that you like to support and kind of root for or um, cry about.
Well, we won't talk about the Bears thus far this year, but to play, I'm an avid golfer. I love a good golf match and get
Nice.
excited about the state chapters of ASHI outings that they have. And I am polishing my skeet shoot skills with those events as well. But definitely a huge college basketball fan. I tend to lean more towards the college ball fans. And for those of you that don't know, I'm originally from the Syracuse, New York area, so definitely a supporter of the Syracuse Orangemen.
Nice, nice. I'm sure some people are going to love that no matter what. Here's the big one in the fun question segment. What is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all around work life balance?
Oof. I think that that question means something different at every point in every century that you're alive, right? So that question I would have answered differently, say, for example, at 20. When I answer it differently at 30, and I'll answer it different at 40, and I'm just shy of 50. So I'm giving away my age here. And I think for me, in my current state, as it relates to work, I want to be passionate about what I'm doing every day, or I don't want to get up and do it, right? I don't want to go to a job or just a career every day that's going to provide me with a paycheck. I think that there needs to be meaning behind what we do. And I love what I do and I love my field and my industry. Could I have made more money in my career outside of healthcare? Sure. But I think going back to your question about purpose, that that's what drives me. Compliance drives me, code drives me every day, and that's where my passion. How I turn off, I think it's important to use that PTO. I think family comes before anything else, in your health. I'd like to work out. I think it's important to meditate and do some yoga. I have some balance there, and sure, an occasional glass of red wine doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I can get behind all of that. That's why I tell everybody, look, there's no wrong answers here. It's like we're all going through it, and some people might say, well, why do you keep asking that? I'm like, I think it's interesting. I think it's fun. And at the end of the day, all this rage around magic silver bullets and AI and all this lack of critical thinking that I'm very
Right.
concerned about being like a on the endangered species list because people aren't doing it the way they used to. And I think it's important. We're human beings. So it's really, really good stuff. So for everyone out there, to get in touch with Michele, it's Michele Mucia. That's Michele, and then it's Mucia, Mucia. She's on LinkedIn. You can find her there, and you can see her or find her at various events throughout the industry. And I would encourage you to not only attend her presentations and webinars, but if you do see her, strike up a conversation. I would say not only very approachable, but extremely knowledgeable and wants to make a difference. And I'm circling back on that purpose because the reason I actually asked that question at that segment was because of the third question in the fun question segment. I usually don't tell people how and why I think, but
Mhm.
that's what it was, and you knocked that out of the park. I mean, forget about it. Michele, thank you for being on CMMS Radio.
And thank you so much, Greg, for the privilege of doing that. I've really loved getting to know you. And again, in any way I can help the industry or educate or learn to be able to take that back to my job every day, I'd be happy to do it. And thanks again.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit cmmsradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.